A poor boy saved a millionaire's father from tragedy. But when the police arrived, it turned out that the millionaire's father was sick. Marcus worked at a small bakery called Harriet's Bakes, where the smell of warm bread and sweet pastries filled the air every morning. The bakery's cheerful exterior hid Marcus's struggles well. Behind his polite smile and cheerful greetings was a man battling more than one storm. Marcus lived under the highway bridge in a weathered tent, tucked along the riverbank. His shoes were worn, his clothes thin against the biting cold, but his spirit held firm. Every morning, Marcus would leave his makeshift home and walk to the bakery, dreaming of one day owning his own place, a bakery where everyone could afford a warm meal, no matter their pocketbook. That morning, Marcus arrived at Harriet's earlier than usual. He was rolling dough and sprinkling cinnamon on pastries when Clara, his co-worker, walked in. Clara was an older woman with a sharp tongue but a soft heart. She noticed Marcus's tired eyes immediately. "Marcus," she said, wiping her hands on her apron, "you've been looking like death warmed over lately. Are you getting any sleep at all?" Marcus chuckled weakly, shaking his head. "Not much. It's the cold. Gets right through the blankets." Clara paused, her brow furrowing. "Where are you staying these days? You've been cagey about it." Marcus hesitated. He didn't like to admit to anyone where he lived, but something about Clara's voice made him feel safe. "Under the bridge near 9th Street, he said quietly. "It's not much, but it's dry when it rains." Clara stared at him, her lips pressed into a thin line. "And what about family? Friends? Nobody to help you?" "No one left," Marcus said, his voice soft. "My parents, they passed when I was 15. Car accident." His hands worked the dough automatically as he spoke, kneading the memories into the flour. It was hard after that. Foster care, bouncing from place to place. No one really cared, and I didn't stick around long enough to matter. Clara's voice softened. "And now you're here, in this bakery, working your tail off for peanuts." Marcus shrugged. "I'm here because it's a job, and because people need a warm loaf of bread every now and then. Maybe someday I'll get my own shop. Something simple, you know?" Clara gave him a long look before sighing. "Well, for what it's worth, you've got more grit than most people I know." Marcus smiled faintly, but their conversation was cut short by the ding of the bakery's front bell. The first customer of the day had arrived. The hours passed in a blur of clinking trays and the smell of sugar. Marcus moved from task to task, his thoughts trailing back to the dreams he rarely spoke aloud. By noon, the bakery was bustling with customers. Marcus paused near the window, wiping his hands on his apron. As he looked outside, something caught his eye. A frail old man, shuffling across the street. The man's gait was uneven, his steps uncertain, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then, it happened. The man stumbled, his cane clattering to the ground as his legs gave way beneath him. Marcus watched in horror as he fell into the street, directly in the path of an oncoming car. "Hey!" Marcus shouted, his voice startling the customers inside. Without thinking, he bolted from behind the counter, dodging through the bakery's door and into the street. The car screeched to a halt, its tires smoking on the pavement. Marcus reached the man just in time, pulling him back onto the curb. His heart was pounding as he crouched beside him, trying to steady his breath. "Sir," Marcus said urgently, "are you okay?" The old man looked up at him with dazed, cloudy eyes. He muttered something Marcus couldn't make out, his frail hands clutching at Marcus's coat. "You're safe now," Marcus assured him. "Let's get you off the street." The bakery's customers stared from the windows as Marcus half-carried, half-guided the man back to the shop. The old man's body was frail, his steps unsteady, but he leaned heavily on Marcus, as though sensing the younger man's strength. When they reached the bakery, Marcus led him to a chair in the corner and grabbed a blanket from the back room. Wrapping it around the man's shoulders, Marcus knelt beside him. "Let me get you some tea," he said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline still coursing through him. The man's lips trembled as he tried to speak. Thank you," he said softly. "It's no trouble," Marcus replied. "Let me get you warmed up." As Marcus brewed the tea, the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in. The man had nearly been killed, and no one else had stopped to help. Marcus brought over a steaming cup, sitting across from the man as he drank. "Do you have a name?" he asked gently. The man nodded slowly. "George," he said after a pause, "but I don't know where I am. I was trying to find my son." Marcus's heart ached at the confusion in George's eyes. "Don't worry, George," he said. "We'll figure this out." Little did Marcus know, this rescue was only the beginning of a series of events that would change his life forever. Marcus sat across from George, watching the steam curl upward from the cup of tea in the old man's trembling hands. George's frailty and confusion weighed heavily on Marcus, who had seen too many people in life left to fend for themselves when they needed help the most. "Do you remember where you were headed?" Marcus asked softly, leaning forward. George shook his head slowly, his cloudy eyes searching the bakery as if the answer might appear in the rows of pastries and bread. I don't know. I just wanted to see Alex." "Alex? Your son?" Marcus pressed gently, hoping for more details. "Yes, Alex," George repeated, his voice distant. He's busy. Always busy." Marcus nodded, his heart sinking at the evident disconnection between father and son. He decided it was best to get help. George needed to be somewhere safe, and Marcus couldn't provide that here in the bakery. He stood up, walking toward Clara, who was nervously peering out at George from behind the counter. "We need to call someone," Marcus said in a low voice. "The police, maybe. See if they can figure out who he is." Clara hesitated, her eyes darting between Marcus and George. "You think they'll help?" she asked skeptically. Marcus shrugged. "I have to try." A short while later, 2 officers entered the bakery. Their presence, with crisp uniforms and authoritative bearing, turned the heads of the remaining customers. Marcus greeted them, explaining everything: how he'd seen George fall in the street, the near accident, and George's confusion. The older officer, a stocky man with kind eyes, crouched beside George. "Sir," he said softly, "do you have any identification on you? Anything with your name?" George looked at him blankly, then reached into his coat pocket, producing a battered wallet. Inside was a driver's license, though it had long since expired, and a business card. The officer examined the items, his eyebrows raising slightly when he read the name on the card. "Wait here," the officer said to Marcus, before stepping outside to make a call. Within 20 minutes, the sound of tires crunching against gravel drew Marcus's attention. A sleek black car with tinted windows pulled up in front of the bakery. The door opened and a man stepped out, his presence commanding even before he spoke a word. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. His dark hair was perfectly groomed, and he wore an air of authority that seemed to part the crowd instinctively. This was a man who was used to walking into a room and being noticed. "Dad!" the man exclaimed, hurrying into the bakery. His voice carried a mixture of worry and exasperation. "What are you doing here?" George's face lit up with recognition, the confusion fading slightly. "Alex!" he said, his voice breaking with emotion. The man knelt beside him, taking George's hand. "Dad, we've been looking for you everywhere. Why didn't you stay home?" George's expression clouded again, his voice trembling. I wanted to see you, Alex, but I got lost." Alex sighed deeply, glancing up at the officers. "I'm Alex Carter," he introduced himself. "This is my father, George. He's been diagnosed with early-stage dementia. Sometimes he wanders." The officer nodded. "He's lucky this young man was here," he said, gesturing to Marcus. "He got him out of a dangerous situation." Alex turned to Marcus, his sharp gaze softening slightly. "You saved him?" "I just did what anyone else would have done," Marcus said, feeling uncomfortable under the man's piercing eyes. "No, you didn't," Alex said firmly. "Most people wouldn't have bothered. They'd have walked right past him." George reached for Marcus's hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "He's a good boy, Alex," George said. "He helped me." Alex stood, his presence looming over Marcus as he extended a hand. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "If there's anything I can do to repay you, just let me know." Marcus hesitated, then shook his hand. "Really? It's nothing." "Still," Alex insisted, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a sleek black business card. "Call me. I mean it." Marcus pocketed the card, unsure if he'd ever use it. As Alex helped his father toward the car, the bakery fell silent, the remaining customers murmuring among themselves about the unexpected drama. That night, back under the bridge, Marcus sat in his tent, the card resting in his palm. The name Alex Carter shimmered in silver foil against the black surface, and beneath it the words Carter Automotive Group. He flipped the card over, tracing his finger across the number. It was tempting to call, to reach out to the wealthy man who had offered to help. But a lifetime of pride held him back. He'd never been one to rely on others. "I did what I had to do," he muttered to himself, "not for a reward." As he set the card aside and laid down to sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last he'd see of Alex Carter or his father. Little did Marcus know, Alex was already working on a way to repay the baker who had saved his father. And it was a plan that would turn Marcus's life upside down. The sun dipped low over the city, painting the horizon in hues of gold and crimson, as Marcus finished his shift at Harriet's Bakes. The bakery had been quieter than usual after the morning's chaos, but Marcus couldn't shake the lingering tension in his chest. Saving George had felt like the right thing to do. Yet something about Alex Carter's stern presence and polished appearance unsettled him. As he locked the bakery door for the night, Marcus felt the weight of the black business card in his pocket. He hadn't mentioned it to Clara, nor to anyone else. The idea of calling a millionaire, let alone asking for help, felt distant, even absurd. But the card was there, a tangible reminder of a world far removed from his tent beneath the bridge. Marcus trudged down the dimly lit sidewalk, his hands shoved into his coat pockets against the evening chill. His thoughts wandered back to his parents, as they often did on long walks like this. The memory of their warmth kept him moving, even when the weight of the world felt unbearable. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional hum of a car in the distance. Marcus crossed an intersection, his breath visible in the cold air, when suddenly a sharp squeal of brakes pierced the silence. Before he could react, the world spun. A force slammed into his side, and he was thrown onto the pavement. Pain exploded through his body as he hit the ground, his vision blurring for a moment before he realized what had happened. A car. Someone had hit him. "Hey, are you all right?" a panicked voice called out. Marcus groaned, struggling to push himself up. A man in his mid-30s rushed over, his face pale. "I didn't see you! You came out of nowhere! I'm so sorry!" Marcus winced, clutching his side. His leg throbbed painfully, and he could feel a wet warmth spreading on his knee where his jeans had torn. "I think I'll live," he muttered through gritted teeth. I can't afford this," the man stammered, running a hand through his hair. "Do you have insurance? I'll pay you back, I swear, but I'm strapped right now." "Insurance?" Marcus let out a bitter laugh despite the pain. "Do I look like someone with insurance?" The man hesitated, guilt flashing in his eyes. "Look, I don't want to leave you like this, but—" "You're not leaving him," a firm voice cut through the tension. Both men turned to see Clara standing a few feet away. She must have been on her way home from work, though Marcus had no idea how she'd arrived so suddenly. She marched up to them, her eyes blazing. "You're going to help him," she said, jabbing a finger at the driver. "Whether you can afford it or not." Marcus shook his head, feeling a wave of dizziness wash over him. "Clara, it's fine. I'll figure it out." "No, you won't," she snapped. "This is serious, Marcus. You can't just walk this off. You need to see a doctor." He knew she was right. The pain in his leg was growing worse by the second, and the thought of medical bills made his stomach churn. For the first time, he felt truly stuck. Then, his fingers brushed against something in his pocket. The business card. The business card. Marcus hesitated, pulling it out and staring at it as if it were some kind of lifeline. Could he really call Alex Carter? It felt ridiculous, yet in this moment, he had no other option. With a deep breath, Marcus dialed the number. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "This is Alex Carter." Hi," Marcus began, wincing as he shifted on the pavement. "It's Marcus, the baker, from the bakery this morning." There was a pause. "Marcus, is everything all right?" "Not exactly," Marcus admitted. "I got hit by a car on my way home and, well, I don't have insurance or money for the hospital." Alex's voice sharpened immediately. "Are you injured? Where are you?" Marcus gave him the cross streets, feeling a pang of embarrassment as he explained the situation. He half expected Alex to brush him off, but instead, the man's tone softened. "Stay where you are. I'll send someone to get you." Within 15 minutes, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. Marcus couldn't believe it when Alex himself stepped out, his expression unreadable. He crouched beside Marcus, taking in the scene with a critical eye. "You weren't kidding," Alex said, gesturing to the torn jeans and the scrape on Marcus's arm. "Come on. Let's get you to a hospital." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but the stern look on Alex's face silenced him. With surprising gentleness, Alex helped Marcus into the SUV, while Clara stood nearby, her arms crossed protectively. "You're lucky," Clara told Marcus, as Alex climbed into the driver's seat. "Most people wouldn't pick up the phone, let alone show up." Marcus nodded faintly, though he couldn't shake the unease in his chest. Why was Alex helping him? What did he owe this man, and what would it cost him in return? The emergency room was a blur of bright lights and hurried voices. Alex stayed by Marcus's side through the whole ordeal, making sure he was seen quickly. X-rays confirmed a fractured leg, and the doctor applied a cast while Marcus sat quietly, his mind racing. "You didn't have to do all this," Marcus said to Alex once they were alone. "I could have figured something out." Alex raised an eyebrow. "You saved my father. Do you really think I'd let you suffer over something like this?" "I didn't save him to get anything in return," Marcus said firmly. "I know," Alex replied, his voice quiet. "That's why you're worth helping." Marcus didn't know what to say. For years, he'd struggled alone, believing no one cared enough to reach out. Now, for the first time, he felt the faintest glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Things were starting to change. But this was only the beginning. Unbeknownst to Marcus, Alex had a plan that would not only repay his kindness, but also reshape his entire future. Marcus's days at the hospital were a strange mix of pain and gratitude. The fractured leg meant weeks of rest, a luxury Marcus couldn't afford under normal circumstances. But Alex Carter had covered everything: hospital bills, physical therapy, even a temporary apartment so Marcus wouldn't have to go back to the tent under the bridge. Then came the $10,000. Alex handed Marcus the check himself, his expression steady but kind. "This is for you," Alex said, sliding the envelope across the small hospital table. "To cover expenses while you recover." Marcus hesitated, staring at the check as if it might catch fire. I can't take this," he said finally, shaking his head. "You've done enough already." "It's not charity," Alex said firmly. "Think of it as an investment. You helped my father when no one else would. The least I can do is make sure you're not struggling." Marcus sighed, the weight of his pride battling against the practicality of his situation. Finally, he nodded. "Thank you," he said softly, the words carrying more gratitude than he could express. Weeks passed, and Marcus adjusted to his new, albeit temporary, life. The small apartment Alex provided was modest but clean, with a view of the bustling city streets he'd once walked as a shadow. For the first time in years, Marcus felt stability creeping into his life. Then, one crisp morning, Alex called. "Can you meet me at the dealership?" he asked. "I want to discuss something with you." Marcus agreed, curiosity gnawing at him. The dealership was an enormous glass building that shimmered in the sunlight, with sleek sports cars and luxury sedans gleaming in the lot. Marcus felt out of place as he stepped through the automated doors, his cast clunking against the polished floor. Alex greeted him with a handshake. "Glad you could make it," he said. "Come with me." They walked through the showroom, past rows of Porsches, Jaguars, and Mercedes-Benzes. Marcus couldn't help but marvel at the pristine machines, their glossy exteriors reflecting the bright showroom lights. When they reached Alex's office, Alex gestured for Marcus to sit. "I've been thinking about how to thank you properly," Alex began. "I know the money and hospital bills helped, but I want to do something more meaningful." Marcus tilted his head, intrigued. "How would you feel about working here?" Alex asked, leaning forward. "As a car salesman." Marcus blinked, stunned. "Me? A salesman? You've got the personality for it," Alex said with a small smile. "You're kind, approachable, and people trust you. That's exactly what this place needs. Plus, it pays better than rolling dough at a bakery." Marcus hesitated, the enormity of the offer sinking in. A job here wasn't just a paycheck, it was a chance to change his life. "You think I can do it?" Marcus asked finally, doubt creeping into his voice. "I know you can," Alex said. "You're resilient, Marcus. That's half the battle." As Marcus processed the offer, Alex showed him around the dealership, introducing him to staff and explaining the basics of the job. Marcus tried to absorb everything, but his thoughts kept drifting to his uncertain future. Just as they were finishing the tour, an argument broke out in the showroom. A tall man in a tailored suit was yelling at a young salesman, his voice echoing through the glass walls. "I ordered this car 3 weeks ago, and it's not here!" the man shouted, his face red with frustration. "I'm done waiting!" Alex frowned and motioned for Marcus to follow him. "Sir," Alex began calmly, "I'm Alex Carter, the owner. Let's figure this out." But the man wasn't interested in explanations. "I don't care who you are. I've had enough of your incompetent staff." Before Alex could respond, Marcus stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus said, his tone calm but firm. "Can you tell me what car you ordered?" The man blinked, clearly caught off guard. "It was the new Porsche 911, he snapped. "It was supposed to be here last week." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. "That's a fantastic car. I understand why you're frustrated. It's a big investment, and you expected better communication. Let me see what I can do to make this right." The man hesitated, his anger softening slightly under Marcus's steady gaze. "Give me a few minutes," Marcus continued. "If I can't fix this, I'll make sure you leave with something better than an apology." Alex watched in quiet amazement as Marcus calmly navigated the situation. After a few quick questions to the staff and a call to the warehouse, Marcus returned to the customer. "Your car's ready, sir," Marcus said. "It arrived yesterday but hadn't been logged into the system yet. We'll have it detailed and brought out front for you in under an hour." The man stared at him, then nodded, his anger all but gone. "Thank you," he said, his tone much softer. As the man walked away, Alex turned to Marcus, a grin spreading across his face. "You've got the job," he said. That night, as Marcus sat in his small apartment, he thought about the strange path his life had taken. From living under a bridge to standing in a luxury dealership, it felt almost surreal. But one thing was clear: this was only the beginning. Marcus's first weeks at the dealership felt like stepping into another world. The gleaming cars, polished floors, and well-dressed clients were a far cry from the flour-dusted counters and warm smells of Harriet's bakes. His new co-workers were kind enough, though some raised eyebrows when they learned of his unconventional background. But Marcus had a knack for connecting with people. He treated each customer with genuine care, listening to their stories and helping them find cars that suited their needs. It wasn't long before his sales numbers began to rise, and Alex took notice. "You're a natural," Alex said one day, leaning against a sleek black Porsche. "I knew you'd be good at this, but you've exceeded my expectations." Marcus smiled, though he still felt a pang of doubt. "I'm just doing what I've always done, helping people," he said. "Don't downplay it," Alex replied. "You're doing more than that. You're building trust, and that's priceless in this business." Marcus nodded, grateful for Alex's encouragement. But as he walked back to his desk, a shadow of uncertainty lingered. Success felt strange, almost temporary, as if life might snatch it away at any moment. One chilly afternoon, Marcus was reviewing paperwork when a familiar face appeared in the showroom. It was Clara, his old co-worker from the bakery. She stood near the entrance, her expression a mix of awe and hesitation. "Clara," Marcus called, waving her over. Her face lit up, and she hurried to him. "Marcus, look at you! I hardly recognized you in this fancy place," she said, her tone filled with warmth. Marcus grinned. "Yeah, it's a bit different from rolling dough, isn't it?" Clara chuckled, but quickly turned serious. "I wanted to check on you. After everything that happened, I was worried." Marcus's heart warmed at her concern. "I'm okay, Clara. Better than I've been in years, actually." Clara looked around the showroom, her eyes wide. "This is amazing. But you're still you, right? Still the Marcus who shared his lunch when I forgot mine?" "Always," Marcus said with a smile. As they talked, a well-dressed man approached, catching Marcus's attention. "Excuse me," the man said, his tone impatient. "Are you Marcus?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. "I heard you're the best salesman here," the man said, adjusting his cufflinks. "I need a car. Something fast, elegant, and rare." "Money's not an issue," Marcus nodded, slipping into professional mode. "I have just the thing. Let me show you." Marcus led the man to a limited-edition sports car, its sleek curves and metallic paint glinting under the showroom lights. As he described the car's features, the man listened intently, nodding occasionally. But then, without warning, the man turned to Clara. "What are you doing here?" he asked sharply, his tone dripping with disdain. Clara stiffened, her eyes widening in shock. "Excuse me? You don't belong here," the man said, his voice cold. "This isn't some corner bakery." Marcus stepped in, his voice firm. "Sir, that's uncalled for. Clara is my guest." The man scoffed. "Guest? She looks like she walked in off the street." Marcus's temper flared, but he forced himself to stay calm. "With all due respect, sir, I think you should leave. We treat everyone with respect here, and I won't tolerate anything less." The man's face reddened, but he said nothing more. He turned and left the dealership, his footsteps echoing angrily across the floor. Clara placed a hand on Marcus's arm, her voice soft. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Marcus replied. "No one deserves to be treated like that." The incident with the rude customer spread quickly among the dealership staff. Some praised Marcus for standing up to the man, while others muttered that he'd cost the company a sale. Alex called Marcus into his office the next morning. "I heard what happened," Alex said, his tone unreadable. Marcus braced himself. "If you're going to fire me—" "Fire you?" Alex interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "I'm not firing you. I'm impressed." Marcus blinked, surprised. "Most people would have let that slide to secure the sale," Alex continued. "But you stood by your values. That's rare in this business, Marcus, and it's why you're going to go far." Marcus exhaled, relief washing over him. "But," Alex added, a small smile tugging at his lips, "you might want to work on handling those situations without scaring off potential clients." Marcus chuckled, grateful for Alex's understanding. Later that week, Alex invited Marcus to a private event at his mansion. It was a celebration of the dealership's recent success, but Alex had another reason for inviting Marcus. As the evening unfolded, Alex pulled Marcus aside. "There's something I want to give you," Alex said, leading Marcus to the driveway. Parked there was a sleek, gently used luxury sedan. "It's yours," Alex said, handing Marcus the keys. Marcus stared at the car, his mouth opening and closing in disbelief. "You're kidding, right?" "Not at all," Alex said. "You've earned it. Consider it an investment in your future." Tears welled in Marcus's eyes as he took the keys. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep proving me right," Alex replied with a grin. As Marcus drove home that night, the hum of the engine beneath him felt like a promise, a reminder that kindness, resilience, and integrity could pave roads he'd never imagined walking, let alone driving. Months passed, and Marcus thrived in his new role at Alex's dealership. The boy who once rolled dough in a bakery and lived under a bridge now sold luxury cars to the city's elite. Yet, Marcus hadn't let success change his heart. He still carried the same humility and kindness that had defined him through life's harshest challenges. But life, as Marcus knew well, never stopped testing you. It was a bustling day at the dealership when a man Marcus hadn't seen in years walked through the doors. His heart sank as recognition hit him. Victor, one of his foster brothers from his teenage years. Victor had always been trouble, running schemes and dragging others into his messes. "Marcus!" Victor called, spreading his arms wide like they were old friends. Marcus forced a smile. "Victor, what are you doing here?" Victor leaned in conspiratorially. "I heard you've been doing well for yourself. Got yourself a fancy job? Nice car?" His voice dropped, dripping with fake camaraderie. "You know, I could use a little help. Just a small loan to get back on my feet." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I don't have money to lend, Victor. You know that." Victor's expression hardened, his friendly facade dropping. Come on, Marcus. Don't forget who you owe. I looked out for you back then, remember? Marcus stared at him, the memories of those chaotic foster home days flashing through his mind. Victor had never looked out for anyone but himself. Victor, Marcus said firmly, I worked hard for this. I'm not going to let you guilt me into anything. If you're serious about turning your life around, there are places that can help. But I'm not your bank. Victor's face darkened, but Marcus didn't waver. After a tense moment, Victor scoffed and turned on his heel, storming out of the dealership. The confrontation left Marcus shaken, but he didn't let it distract him for long. A week later, Alex called him into his office with news that left him stunned. Marcus, Alex began, I've been watching you closely, and you've exceeded every expectation. You're not just selling cars, you're building relationships, trust, and loyalty. I think you're ready for the next step. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Next step? Alex leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile on his face. I want you to manage your own branch. We're opening a new dealership across town, and I can't think of anyone better to lead it than you. The words hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. You want me to run a dealership? That's right, Alex said. You've earned it. And don't worry, I'll be here to guide you. As Marcus stepped into his new role as manager, he reflected on how far he'd come. He didn't just want to succeed for himself. He wanted to give others the chances he'd been given. One of his first initiatives as manager was starting a program to provide entry-level jobs at the dealership for underprivileged youth. He worked closely with local charities, ensuring young people who struggled like he once did had a chance to learn and grow. The program became a huge success, bringing fresh energy to the dealership while changing lives. Marcus even brought Clara on board to help run it, knowing her heart for others was as big as his. One crisp autumn morning, Marcus received a call from George's caretaker. George's condition had worsened, and he was in the hospital. Marcus visited immediately, walking into the same ward where he had once been a patient. George's face lit up when he saw Marcus. "Ah, my boy," he said weakly, his voice tinged with warmth. "You've come so far." Marcus sat by his bedside, holding his hand. "Thanks to you," he said. "If I hadn't helped you that day, none of this would have happened." George smiled faintly. "You helped me because it's who you are. Never lose that, Marcus. Kindness is the best thing we can leave behind." George passed peacefully the next morning, leaving Marcus with a heavy but grateful heart. A year after taking over the dealership, Marcus stood before a crowd at a charity gala hosted by Alex Carter. The event, held in memory of George, was raising funds for dementia research. As Marcus addressed the attendees, his voice carried the weight of his journey. "I started this path under a bridge, dreaming of something better," he said. "But it wasn't success or wealth that changed my life. It was the kindness of one man who believed in me. And now, I want to pass that kindness on to others." The room erupted in applause, and Alex stepped forward, clapping Marcus on the back. "You've made me proud," Alex said quietly. Marcus smiled, looking out at the sea of faces. For the first time, he felt he truly belonged, not just to the dealership, but to a community built on hope and compassion. Marcus's dealership thrived, but it was the people he helped that defined his success. His journey, from baker to manager, was proof that kindness could spark transformation, even in the hardest of circumstances. As he drove home that night in the car Alex had gifted him, Marcus thought about George's words. "Kindness is the best thing we can leave behind." And he vowed to live by those words for the rest of his days. Did this touching story of hope and perseverance inspire you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What moved you the most? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and discover more uplifting tales of courage and transformation on our channel. Together, let's celebrate the power of kindness and the resilience of the human spirit. See you in the next heartwarming story.